The evening air is still warm from the day, but there's a softness to it now, like the earth has taken off its sandals and decided to sigh. You're walking beside a narrow stream that cuts through a valley the color of old golden summer dust. Reeds rustle quietly, dragonflies hover without purpose, and everything seems to exhale in rhythm with your own breath. Somewhere nearby, a cicada starts a solo and gives up halfway through. Mood. You probably won't make it through this day. Not because anything dramatic happens, oh no. Just because the world here moves so slowly, so gently, that your eyelids will eventually surrender. But before that, gently, sweetly, maybe just click the like button. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel for more of these sleepy historical wanderings. If you're watching from somewhere distant or deliciously cozy, let us know your location and what time it is. We like to imagine you, wrapped in a blanket, slipping into dreams just as a god forgets your name. Now let's ease into tonight's journey. There was once an nymph. And like most nymphs, she lived in a river. Or, more accurately, she was the river. Because in those mythic days of marble and metaphor, water was just water. It was a personality, a mood, a habit that meandered across the landscape. Her name was Leodora, or maybe Calahor, or possibly Meliwan, depending on which poet you ask and how much wine they'd had. Historians, as expected, still debate which version was canon, which is a polite way of saying they've given up. Anyway, this particular nymph lived in a slow, shallow river somewhere between Delphi and Oblivion. Her waters were clean but not showy. Birds liked her. Fish gossiped in her currents. And she, in turn, hummed songs made from cool stones and trickling echoes. Until one day, she forgot she was water. Now, before you get dramatic, she didn't explode or evaporate. She just slowed down, drifted less, wandered less, grew still, which for a river is kind of a big deal. No one noticed it first. Not the nearby shepherd with more curls than sheep. Not the boy who skimmed flat stones across her belly every morning before breakfast. Even the frogs, deeply self-absorbed creatures, didn't pause their conversations about mud and bugs. But the river knew. And tonight, you're walking along her banks not to solve her mystery, but just to listen. To the way water remembers. To the way forgetting can be gentle. You dip your fingers into the stream. It's warm. And still. And it hums low, like someone trying to recall a tune they once knew by heart. You walk a little farther upstream, your feet finding the rhythm of stone and moss. The light is soft now, amber and lavender, blending like a faded fresco. Overhead, the sky forgets to be dramatic and just hangs there, politely pastel. To your left, a small olive tree leans over the river, its gnarled trunk twisted like it once tried to walk away but changed its mind. A ribbon is tied to one of its branches, faded blue, fluttering just enough to say someone was here. This part of the river used to dance, or so the stories say. Twisting through reeds, splashing against roots, spinning leaves like it was rehearsing for something grand. But now? Now the water drifts like a daydream. Like it's forgotten how to hurry. You sit on a flat stone by the edge and listen. There are frogs again. One croaks with surprising confidence. Another answers, slightly off minus key. Nature's original duet. A dragonfly lands on your sleeve. It stays long enough to make things awkward, then takes off without a thank minus you. Here's a historical fact to swirl gently in your thoughts. Ancient Greeks believed nymphs were tied to their environment so deeply that if the spring dried up, or the tree fell, or the river stilled, the spirit vanished too. And here's your cultural tidbit in some lesser minus known myths. Nymphs who forgot their nature didn't die, they simply transformed. Into mist. Into moss. Into that feeling you get when you know you're forgetting something. but it doesn't feel urgent. The wind brushes past you now. Not cold, not warm. Just the kind of breeze that carries stories and doesn't ask you to verify the source. You lean back against the olive tree. Its bark is rough but familiar, like someone who's been quiet for too long and finally says you again. From here, you can see a bend in the river where the water pools into a glassy mirror. That's where she sat, long ago. Not on the bank. Not in it. She was it. Watching birds skim across her surface. Listening to reeds gossip about the wind. Letting minnows draw spirals across her shoulders. You close your eyes for a moment and almost hear her voice water on stone, soft and slow. I used to remember, it says, but now I rest. And honestly, so do you. The sun has nearly slipped behind the distant hills, leaving the sky with just enough color to be sentimental. Purple's melting into soft orange, like the gods count and decide between dusk and desert. The river glows faintly now, not from speed, but from memory. You rise and walk toward the quiet bend you spotted earlier. The water here moves a little more, circling gently as if it's trying to remember the steps of a dance it once knew by heart. A few reeds sway at the edge, casting long shadows across the surface like sleepy brushstrokes upon a lazy canvas. There's a flat stone half-mine submerged at the edge. Smooth, wide, and unmistakably inviting. Use it. The stone is warm, but just barely, like it borrowed a little sunlight and then forgot to give it back. Here's a lovely little historical truth. The Greeks often left small offerings to river nymphs at spots like this: bits of bread, threads of wool, tiny cups of honeyed wine. Not to bribe them, but to say, we see you. You glance down and spot something round and pale resting in the mud. Possibly a smooth pebble. Possibly a 2-1,000-year-old offering that forgot to be found. A soft splash draws your gaze upstream. A fish, or a ghost, or a very confused leaf. It vanishes before you can decide. You notice something strange, a flower blooming in the water itself. Just one. Brightened yellow with petals wide open and absolutely no concern for seasons. A scholar once wrote that nymphs who grew tired of human nonsense sometimes turned into plants, quiet, decorative, and pleasantly ignored. Historians still debate whether that was metaphor or actual Garden commentary. You reach out to touch the flower. You stop just before your fingers meet the surface. Somehow it feels wrong to interrupt. You've never been one for fragile things, but this has presence. And presence, as it turns out, is stronger than memory. The breeze shifts. The reeds hush. You lean back again, supported now by the world itself. And for the first time today, the river moves just slightly faster, like it too is curious about what happens next. Darkness arrives with the quiet confidence of something that's been doing this forever. No fanfare. No sudden chill. Just the soft retreat of light and the subtle arrival of silver. You're still at the bend, but now the sky has changed costumes. The stars are beginning to show up, fashionably late and faintly blinking, like they're still figuring out the mood. A crescent moon hangs above the treetops, smug and unbothered. The river, for all its earlier hesitation, has become more talkative. The surface shimmers with small ripples. Not enough to wake the frogs, but just enough to say, still here. You wander down a bit, past the flat stone toward a willow tree whose branches dip low like they're trying to drink. The roots are tangled and submerged. Use it against one. It does not object. Here's your bit of midnight history. Some myths saying imps would whisper secrets to trees, stories of the mortals they watched, the gods they avoided, the dreams they couldn't forget. Trees, being famously patient, never interrupted. They just grew around the stories. An owl calls out from somewhere above. Then silence again. You can almost feel the river listening. A curious thing catches your eye, something glinting in the mud. You reach down, gently. A smooth shard of pottery, painted faintly with a spiral in something that might be a fish or a particularly anxious horse. It fits neatly in your palm. Could be an offering. Could be trash. The river, like time, is excellent at mixing the two. You hold on to it anyway. Weird scholarly tidbit: one surviving scroll claims that when a nymph forgot her name, the stars would write it in water visible only to those half-minus asleep and fully quiet. The scroll ends there. No directions. No star chart. Just the mystery. You look up. The stars don't say much, but they blink more now. And the river, it glows just faintly, like someone remembering a story from long ago and smiling without telling it. You don't move for a long while. The willow leans behind you like an old friend with no advice. The river curls beside you like a story with no ending, and the moon, growing bolder, casts a path of pale light across the water that almost looks like an invitation. Eventually, you stand not because the moment ends, but because your legs feel like they've melted into the earth. You walk upstream again, this time following the path of stones that glisten under the moonlight. They're spaced just far enough apart to force a rhythm, like ancient punctuation. You find yourself at a quiet stretch where the river narrows between two gentle hills. On the left bank stands a ruin. Not a dramatic one. Just a few toppled columns and a square platform, its carvings faded and lopsided, like the architect gave up halfway and took a very long nap. You step onto the stone and sit on its edge. This must have been a shrine, or a seat, or both. In Greece, the line between furniture and holy ground was often faint, especially if it involved decent views and shade. Here's your historical fact to file under things we rarely talk about: small shrines to nymphs dotted the countryside in ancient times. Travelers would stop, offer a fig or pour a little wine, and murmur thanks for fresh water and uneventful afternoons. This was spirituality at its gentlest, gratitude with no ceremony. You see something carved into the stone near your foot, barely visible in the moonlight. A name, a fish. A very confused goat? Scholars still debate whether these symbols were prayers or graffiti. Some things never change. There's a jug resting nearby, tilted, cracked, and empty. Perhaps left behind by a worshipper who wandered off, or a nymph who needed both hands to carry silence. You take a breath. The air tastes of moss and distance. The stars reflect in the river, doubling their number. And for a moment, you imagine what it must feel like to be a spirit made of water. To forget your name not out of pain, but out of peace. To dissolve into the thing you love most, until even your memories ripple instead of echo. The breeze brushes your cheek. The stones beneath you hum with sleep. And somewhere nearby, something very old stirs, not waking, just stretching. You begin to walk again, following the river upstream as it winds closer to the mountains, where the stones grow larger and the plants begin to whisper differently. There's a hush to this part of the land, like even the birds have agreed to speak in lullabies. The river here is narrower, cooler. It flows with a little more certainty, like it's remembered its name but doesn't feel the need to say it out loud. You pass under a crooked arch of stone where vines hang like sleepy curtains. A single lantern, or maybe a firefly, flickers just long enough for you to feel noticed. Up ahead, you spot a bridge. Not a grand one. Just a plank of ancient wood, held up by rocks that have long since stopped caring what year it is. You cross slowly. Beneath you, the water flows clear over pale pebbles. A frog sits on a flat stone midstream, staring like it knows your whole backstory but respects your privacy. You reach the far side and follow a path that leads into a grove of laurel trees. Their leaves shimmer faintly even in moonlight. Some say nymphs favored laurel, because it reminded them of what they could have been if they'd just stayed still. Others say the gods just liked how it smelled. Historians disagree, mostly because they weren't invited. A stream that branches off your thinner, quieter, the kind of trickle that only carries whispers. You follow it a little farther and find a pool round and deep, tucked beneath a limestone outcrop. You sit at its edge. The water is impossibly clear. You can see all the way to the bottom, where smooth stones rest like sleeping thoughts. Here's your obscure fragment of the night. One scroll describes a nymph who forgot she was water, then remembered, then chose to forget again because she liked the quiet. No name was given. Just the location where moonlight pulls in silence, runs deep. You may have just found it. You lower your fingers into the water. It's cool, still, welcoming. Not a shock, just a soft reminder you're here. You made it. The stars ripple in the reflection. A breeze lifts the laurel leaves. And for the first time, you hear her voice again barely. A hush. A shimmer. Not words. Just presence. Like a name you used to know. Like a song you never quite finished. Like water remembering how to move. You stay beside the pool longer than you meant to. But time here is less a ticking thing and more of a breathing one. Slow. Rhythmic. Willing to wait. The moon has climbed higher now, and its reflections it's perfect and unbothered in the water so pristine that you half-minus expect it to blink. Around the edge of the pool, tiny flowers have bloomed in the dark. They weren't there before. Or maybe you simply hadn't noticed. You trail a hand along the smooth rock, fingers following the curves as though tracing a forgotten symbol. There's a patch of moss here thick, velvety, faintly damp. It clings not out of desperation, but like someone who's chosen the quietest corner of a party and never looked back. Up above, a branch creaks softly. A night bird hops from twig to twig, more curious than alert. Your clearly not a threat. Just another creature up past its bedtime. Historical fact to ponder under moonlight, nymphs weren't always tied to wild springs and distant hills. Some stories say they lingered near human settlements, gently guiding water to crops or appearing in dreams to midwives. Helpers, not divas. Their power washed about thunder. It was about continuation. You scoop a handful of water and let it run through your fingers. It leaves no residue. No proof. Just a coolness that lingers like a whispered name. Somewhere near the base of the pool, stones are arranged in a deliberate spiral. You're not sure who placed them there. Maybe a shepherd. Maybe a child. Maybe a spirit with nothing better to do that century. Historians haven't weighed in. They're too busy debating whether nymphs ever wore shoes. The breeze picks up slightly, sending a ripple across the water. The moon shatters for just a moment, then reforms, calm, whole, unfazed. You lie back on the moss. It yields just enough to say welcome. Laurel branches sway overhead. A few stars peek through, blinking slowly like they're waiting for your next move. But there isn't one. You're not going anywhere. Not yet. Tonight isn't about movement. It's about remembering how stillness feels. Eventually, the water stills again. And so do you. Not asleep. Just resting in the sort of way that feels earned. But the path isn't finished. And neither is the story. So you sit up reluctantly, gently undries to your feet. The moss seems proud of you. You follow the edge of the stream as it narrows and begins to climb. The rocks here are smoother, as if the water that once flowed over them had a long, quiet conversation before leaving. You step carefully, guided by moonlight and the occasional sound of your own breath. Ahead, the path widens into a clearing. In the center stands a stone column, broken at the top, worn smooth on every side. It might have once held a statue, or a bowl of offerings, or someone's very expensive mistake in urban planning. There are markings on the side barely visible. You kneel, run your hand across the grooves. Not Greek, not exactly. More like someone trying to remember how letters worked, carving feelings instead of grammar. One symbol looks like a river, another like an open eye. A third might be a fish, or just someone with a flair for dramatic flourishes. Historical riddles, some inscriptions left at sacred water sites were never translated because they weren't meant to be. Not by scholars, not by tourists. They were meant for the river. A message from a mortal to the divine, written in a shared language of echo and stillness. You sit beside the column. It's warmer than you expect. Behind it, tucked in a shaded nook of stone, is a small bowl carved from volcanic rock. It's empty now, but you imagine it once held wine, or petals, or tears. A breeze stirs the dust around your feet. You don't brush it off. It belongs here. So do you. Weird mythic detail: one legend claimed a nymph turned herself into a stream, then into a bird, then back into a breeze just to see how many forms it took to feel free. You look around. No audience. No applause. Just stars. Storms. Silence. You lean against the column, eyelids growing heavier. The moon watches. The wind shifts slightly. The stream murmurs a phrase that sounds suspiciously like your name. And somewhere in the quiet, the river remembers. And so do you. The air is cooler now, cool enough that you pull your cloak tighter, though you didn't bring a cloak. And the cloak might not be real. But that's the thing about myth, it gives you what you need. Even if it's just the feeling of being wrapped in something old and soft. You rise again, slowly, the way trees do, inch by inch, thought by thought. The column behind you hums with warmth, and you give it one last touch before moving on. A thank minus you, or a goodbye. It knows the difference. The path veers downhill now, hugging the curve of a hill where thyme and sage grow wild, releasing scent with every breeze. A few crickets stir. One starts a song, immediately regrets it, goes back to bed. You reach another pool, not round this time, but long and narrow, shaded by fig trees and framed by worn stone steps. A small statue stands at one end, missing a hand, but still holding the air with remarkable poise. You sit on the bottom step. The stone is cold, but not unkind. Here's your historical drop of honey. Public baths and sacred pools were often one and the same in ancient Greece. The line between cleanliness and reverence was wonderfully blurred. Offerings were made, prayers whispered, and then someone would take off their sandals and wash the dust of the world away. You reach down and trail your fingers through the pool. The water is cooler here, stiller, deeper. It clings to your skin like memory. Floating in the center is a single laurel leaf. Not drifting, not rushing, just existing perfectly in the center of its own world. A faint breeze stirs the fig leaves above. One falls beside you. No sound, just presence. Here's a weird cultural twist in some regions. People whispered their wishes into fig leaves and floated them down sacred rivers. If the leaf circled, the wish would be granted. If it sank, well, you were advised to rethink your phrasing. You don't have a wish. Not really. But you place the leaf in your palm and close your eyes anyway. A breath. A pause. A ripple. Then, quietly, the water accepts it. The pool slips behind you as you continue along the path, now lit only by the gleam of moonlight bouncing off smooth rock and your own slowly quieting thoughts. The river has changed again. No longer a babbling companion or a silent mirror, it's now a whispering guide, winding through tight gullies and over sleepy roots. It asks nothing, but it invites. You step across a small bridge, so narrow you pause to test your balance. Below, the water flows dark and fast, like it remembers its youth and is showing off just a little. On the other side is a grove. Not large, not dramatic. Just a patch of earth that seems to know it's being watched. The trees rot all in leaning slightly inward, like they're whispering secrets too slow for humans to catch. You find a log half-minus rotten, half-minus thrown and take a seat. The wind sighs through the branches. And there she is. Not the river. Not the girl. Not exactly either. A figure of water and light, sitting across the grove where the moon filters through. You can't see her face. You're not supposed to. But she sits with her knees drawn up, toes in the soil, arms around herself like someone who forgot how to be held. She hums a tune. No words. But you recognize it. It's the river's voice, when it curls around reeds and stones without purpose. It's the same melody you heard back near the willow. Historical footnote, scribbled on the edge of myth nymphs could appear to travelers who walked without maps, stayed too long in places meant for passing, and listened more than they spoke. You've accidentally qualified. The figure lifts her hand, and the river beside her answers, rippling once, then going still. She's not angry. She's not sad. She's remembering. She places a hand on her chest as if to say, I am here. Then she looks at you maybe. Or maybe the moon just shifted. But your breath catches anyway. And in that moment, you don't want answers. You just want to keep sitting here, in a grove where time folds like linen, and the river sings the lullaby of those who remember being water. The grove holds its breath with you. For a moment or maybe more you and the nymph, or the memory of her, or simply a shape in moonlight, sit in parallel silence. The kind of silence that knows you're watching but doesn't mind. She dips her hand into the earth beside her. Not dramatically, just gently. The way someone might dig their fingers into and to remind themselves they exist. You mimic her, resting your hand on the moss beside your log. It's soft, damp, familiar, like returning to a place you've never been but somehow missed. Then, slowly, she rises. The motion is more mist than muscle. Her form blurs at the edges, like the memory of someone walking away in a dream. She doesn't wave, doesn't bow. She simply walks into the water, and where she steps, the river brightens ever so slightly, as if her body has become light. She vanishes beneath the current. No splash. No ceremony. Just presence dissolving into flow. You let out a breath you didn't know you were holding. The trees resume their soft conversation. An owl, possibly the same from earlier, hoots once clearly unimpressed with your emotional state. Here's a gentle truth wrapped in ancient vines. The Greeks didn't fear nymphs, but they did respect them, because beauty that forgets it's beautiful is powerful, because things that drift quietly are often the ones that change everything. You stand and walk to the edge of the river. It's wider here, calmer. There's a reflection of stars, of trees, and just barely of you. But you look a little softer now, like someone who's been seen. Weird fact from a half-minus preserved vase shard: a traveler once left a comb in a river after seeing a nymph. Not to offer, just because he forgot to take it with him. It was later found embedded in rock, fossilized beside an oral root. Historians debate if it's Smith or clumsy bathing. You reach into your pocket. You don't have a comb, but you do have the leaf from earlier, the one the stream accepted. You place it in the river. This time, you don't watch it float. You just turn away, trusting it knows what to do. Behind you, the river glows faintly, Not for you. For her. The path becomes softer again, covered in fallen leaves and the dust of conversations older than language. You walk slowly now, not because you're tired, but because you've stopped trying to arrive. You reach a small rise overlooking a wide bend in the river. Below, moonlight wraps the water in a silver ribbon. The air is still, and so are you. You sit in the grass. No ceremony. Just a pause. Your hand brushes against a small, round object. A pebble. No. A worn token. Smooth and faintly etched. Perhaps a coin, perhaps a game piece. Perhaps something lost by someone who no longer remembers what they were trying to give. It fits in your palm. Like the pottery shard from earlier. Like the silence you've been carrying. Historical thought for your sleepy mind rivers in Greek mythology were often seen as memory itself. Not just places to reflect, but places that remembered you. You could speak to them, and if you were lucky, they would then answer, but they'd hold your words. You lie back in the grass. The stars are louder now. The sky feels close enough to touch, but respectful enough to stay just out of reach. A breeze rolls over the hill. Soft, pine minus sweet, and full of hush. You think about the girl who forgot she was water. Not as a tragedy, but as a choice. Because maybe, some days, she was tired of flowing. Of carrying boats, of holding reflections, of rushing to oceans that never thanked her. Maybe forgetting lost losing. Maybe it was resting. And maybe you haven't walked through this story to find her. Maybe you've walked through it to remember something about yourself. The grass cradles your head. The river hums in your ear. And the stars blink slowly, like a lullaby written in light. You're not entirely sure how long you've been lying there. The sky has shifted just slightly darker now, quieter still. Even the wind seems to have tucked itself under a blanket of dew. But you, oddly enough, are not cold. You feel held, as though the earth beneath you has agreed, just for tonight, to remember who you are. You sit up slowly, careful not to disturb the ancient grass too much. It's older than your thoughts and far more patient. Down by the bend of the river, a flicker catches your eye. Not fire, not star. Just a shimmer, a glint of movement that isn't quite real. You walk down the slope without rushing, feet brushing soft stems and dry moss. Whatever it is, it doesn't run. It waits. At the bottom, you find it a tiny shrine, long abandoned. A ring of stones, half minus buried. A few sticks forming a crooked triangle. And nestled in the center, a clay bowl, cracked but intact. Inside, just dust and the memory of offerings. Once upon a time, someone gave this river their hunger, their longing, their leftover pomegranate seeds, maybe even their hope. And then they moved on. You kneel beside it, undressed, your hands on your knees like you've done this before. And maybe in some life or dream you have. A historical aside, whispered so it doesn't wake, the grass shrines like this were often tended by locals, not priests. By women, children, and old men with too much time and too many stories. No sermons. No incense. Just small gestures and quiet gratitude. And maybe one stolen fig. You look at your hands. You have nothing to offer. And yet, the breeze lifts your hair in approval. Because tonight, you were the offering. A presence. A witness. A soul that listened. You place the smooth token, the coin, or stone or lost game piece, into the bowl. The river does not roar. Its eyes. You stand. You're walking again. But now each step feels less like travel and more like becoming. The trees arch overhead, their limbs not menacing but maternal. You realize they've been following your progress all night, bending ever so slightly to keep you from getting wet. The river is on your left now, a steady friend. It gurgles in a half-minus sleep, the way someone might mutter dreams in a language you once knew. The stars are fewer but brighter, the kind of night sky that doesn't impress, it reassures. Ahead you see another figure. Not a nymph, not a goddess, just a man. Older, perhaps, draped in rough linen, seated on a flat stone. A walking stick rests beside him like a pet. H.E.S. not looking at you, but at the water, as if H.E.S. listening for something he hasn't heard in decades. You pause, unsure, but he speaks without turning. She left, didn't she? You nod. Or maybe you don't. But the answer hangs there anyway. Good, he says. She needed to. Use it beside him at a respectable distance. The silence between you is companionable, like two old cats napping in the same sunbeam. People forget, he murmurs. They think water is just wet. But it's more. It holds things. Things you forget to carry. He pats the stone with a weathered hand. She was never just a nymph. She was the memory of moving forward. The ache of leaving something behind. You're not sure if H.E.S. talking about her, or you, or himself. Historians argue still that nymphs were metaphor or myth, that they symbolized fertility, seasons, youth, memory. Some say they were excuses for why men got lost in the woods. Others say they were warnings. But maybe they were mirrors. The man stands. The path ends soon, he says. But not for you. Then he walks vanishing into the trees without sound, without footprint. Just like a thought that no longer needs to be thought. You sit a little longer. Because you can. You rise slowly from the stone, legs a bit stiff, but your body somehow lighter. As if you shed something. Not just exhaustion or questions, but weight. The kind you don't see until it's gone. The path ahead is narrower now, more like a memory than a road. Leaves scatter across it in layers, like pages of an old book. You step softly, your feet careful not to crumple the words. The forest no longer watches, it rests. You are no longer observed. You belong. Up ahead, the river disappears into a grove of stone and light. You follow, not because you're curious anymore, but because you're ready. And there she is. Not as you first saw her, a startled reflection or half-minus goddess curled in a pool of her own name. No. She's simply sitting on a rock in the middle of the stream. Not glowing. Not posing. Just there. Washing her feet in the water, like any tired traveler would. You wave. She doesn't wave back. But her eyes meet yours and hold. Not like someone checking to see if you understand, but like someone recognizing you as part of the landscape now. I forgot, she says softly. Her voice is quieter than the stream, but somehow louder than everything else. I forgot I was water. You don't know how to respond, so use it on the opposite bank. The air smells like river mint and stone. Will you forget again? You ask. She thinks for a long time. Probably, she shrugs, smiling. That's what humans do. That's what I did when I tried to be one. She flicks water from her toes. It lands on a leaf and turns gold in the moonlight. It's not a sin, forgetting, she adds. It's just tiring. You nod. And for the first time in what feels like centuries, you don't ask for more. You don't press. You don't explain. The water flows between you, not dividing but holding space. The stars arrange themselves into new patterns above. The forest sighs again, already halfway to sleep. And now, as we drift slowly toward the end of this long and gentle story, you feel the way river stones must feel beneath the current still, smoothed, quietly polished by time. Your breath is slowed to match the rhythm of soft water, your body sinking just enough into the weight of the bed beneath you. The world of nymphs and forgotten names feels distant, but not gone. It lingers, like dew on morning grass, or the scent of old trees in your hair. Outside your window, real or imagined, the night leans closer. Not to intrude, but to cradle. The stars remain overhead, not to dazzle, but to watch over you, steady and soft. The moon doesn't ask questions. It only shines. You remember the girl at the river, the one who forgot she was water. And maybe a part of you understands now how easy it is to forget your nature when you spend all day trying to be solid, to be grounded, to be anything but what flows. But here, in this stillness, you have nothing to prove. No edges to maintain. No lists to complete. You are allowed to be fluid again. Allowed to rest. The air around you thickens like velvet, each breath a lullaby, each beat of your heart a reminder you are here. You are safe. You are allowed to let go. Let the story fade now. Let the sound of the river recede like a tide drawing inward. Let your eyes drift wherever they please. No ending needs to be sharp. No sleep needs to be earned. Tonight, you are water. And water always finds its way home. Good night.